It's Tuesday, March 19th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and joining me to do just that is, out of the dregs of fantasy baseball prep, Andy Behrens. Andy, what's going on, buddy?
Yeah, I've emerged from deep in the fantasy baseball mines to speak with you today. It's I think this is the first I've talked to you since Curtis Samuel signed with like a real quarterback and a great team. So I'm just it's my first opportunity to tell you how happy I am for you personally. This must be a great moment for you, for the family. I'm thrilled for you.
Thank you. Yeah, we have not stopped celebrating here in the Harmon household. Basically, it's been kind of a 4 or 5 day just straight up party. No one else really knows what's going on except me, why we're celebrating, but we are celebrating. So yeah, I mean, it's been great. I'm thrilled, obviously, as I said. Was super happy that Ryan Talbot, who does great work covering the Bills, clipped from this podcast a quote of me saying, "I'm alive, bro," multiple times to Dalton Del Don. That was awesome. So shout out to Ryan. Appreciate that. He does great work. That was weird to see that written in print about me, but nevertheless, yeah, Curtis Samuel season is upon us. But Andy, yeah, we got big stuff to do today, buddy. For March 19th, we have a jam-packed NFL show here for the people today. We are going to be unveiling the People's Panic Meter. Dusting it off, man, because, free agency, the dust has settled there. People are panicking about things. As you so aptly put it, it takes a very special fantasy manager NFL fan to be panicking here in March, but the panic is alive and real, baby, so we got to talk about it.
Yeah, shout out to people who panic ahead of the NFL draft too. Like I get it. Like I'm trying to massage like the football ranks as we go along, as we get into the pre-draft period. But man, to anybody who's like super stressed about specific players or specific teams right now, with like only half of the meaningful offseason transactions even behind us, that's just a special kind of fan, and they deserve their own show.
They deserve their own show. They need this show, and we are happy to have you. We are happy to be talking about this, because if you guys need the help, that's what we're here for, to talk through this whole thing. So that's what we're going to do on the show today. By the way, speaking of fantasy baseball, shout out to the one person, because I combed through the replies to your quote tweet of the tweet, who replied and said, "I'm panicked that we can't even talk about baseball in March. Like, we have to talk about football." Those are my favorite people. You know this, Andy. Those are my favorite people out there. So shout out to the cranky fantasy baseball fans who are definitely not listening. If they ever listened to this podcast feed, they definitely don't listen to it anymore, because I just seem to take because I'm hosting the show.
There's not another kind of fantasy baseball player, right? They're all cranky. They're all like crusty and cranky, and they need things to go their way, and they can't handle football in their feed in late March, certainly. So apologies in advance.
Yeah, deep apologies, and that's why you're the king of fantasy baseball. You're the king of crust, Andy Behrens. But before we get to the panic meter, we actually have a lot of news to discuss, because many things have happened since Thursday evening when Dalton and I podcast. So let's jump into it here, starting with the Steelers quarterback situation begins to take shape. So again, a lot of things have happened with the Steelers quarterback situation. First thing that happened, the Eagles sent the 98 overall pick in this year's draft and a 2025 7th round pick to the Steelers in exchange for quarterback Kenny Pickett and the 120th overall pick in this draft. So Kenny Pickett out, Justin Fields in, Andy Behrens, because the Steelers acquired quarterback Justin Fields from the Bears in exchange for a conditional 2025 6th round pick. The pick will become a 4th if Fields plays more than 51% of the snaps. So obviously this was a domino we were all waiting to fall. Certainly, I know you and the rest of Bears Nation have been paying attention to this heavily. Your reaction, Andy, to the Chicago Bears trading Justin Fields to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who also move on from Kenny Pickett, sending him to be the Eagles' backup.
Yeah, I take the Bears, and not everybody feels this way necessarily, but I do take the Bears at their word that they were primarily concerned with sending Justin Fields to a place that Fields actually wanted to play, right? And where he felt he might have, at some point, a serious shot to compete for a starting role. sending him to an environment that should be good for his own development. Like I believe that because number one, they made noises about it in advance. I do think there was probably, and there have been some suggestions from various reporters to this effect that I do think there was probably a better offer out there. Surely there was something better than a 6th round pick for somebody who has obvious elite traits. I mean, super flawed quarterback, no question about it. We can argue about the extent to which he has actually developed from his rookie season to last season, but there's really no arguing that he has some traits that are special by the standards of the position. So I think there was probably a better offer out there, and I believe and I respect the Bears for sending him to the spot that he clearly wanted to go, and that ultimately can be best for him. It's such a weird quarterback room, and it's the team is kind of transitioning into something else right now. Obviously, we talked about Russell Wilson throughout the regular season. Like, I don't honestly know what he is at this stage in his career, and I know that the surface level stats were totally fine last year. Really weird passing charts each week, right? And this, every throw was at or near or behind the line of scrimmage, right? I don't know what he could do at this point. He'd take a couple of deep shots, and then absolutely everything else was, again, at or behind the line of scrimmage. And that's not a real full passing game in the NFL. It's kind of collegiate stuff. So I don't know what that's going to look like. I certainly think that Justin Fields is talented enough to leapfrog him at some point during the season. So kind of hope that happens. I find it very easy to root for Justin Fields. It is a good spot for his development. I like him under Mike Tomlin. I don't. Again, we talked about Arthur Smith as an OC. I don't mind Arthur Smith as an OC, but they're obviously a receiver needy team at this point too. The thing about the Diontae Johnson trade is that it leaves a Diontae Johnson shaped hole in your offense that they have yet to fill.
Which is a pretty sizable hole, especially because it's not like they have someone there just ready to step in.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's George Pickens and then Calvin Austin and Denzel Mims is on this roster. That's a pretty problematic position for them, which, like you said up at the top, we still have an NFL draft to go. The Steelers have to be considered a favorite to take a receiver in the draft. There are some veteran bargain bin options. Maybe this is dated by the time this podcast is posted. Michael Gallup is out there. Odell Beckham is there are guys available, but nobody that's a high quality starting receiver in the prime of their career that Diontae Johnson is. So this is not a perfect landing spot for Justin Fields, but I do think it's a really good spot for him to develop. He doesn't have to start right away. There is a guy in George Pickens that I think there is a good synergy with in terms of the throws that Justin Fields wants to make, working against man coverage, putting it up. He showed a pretty good synergy with DJ Moore on these man coverage beating routes, go routes, curls, stuff like that. That's kind of the George Pickens route tree. Even though people hate that's just the reality of him as a player. I think that's where you want to use him. I think there's an overlap with Fields, and they're going to run the piss out of the ball one way or another. Whether it's Russ starting, certainly if it's Fields starting. Were you surprised by the draft compensation that the Bears got back? Because I know you were the first one to alert this to me that this had become a toxic situation on Bears. On the internet for the Bears, right? You said that to me back in January. I was like, really? This is toxic? And then, by the time we get here, right, the week before Justin Fields is traded, Josh Norris is posting his YouTube comments about how everybody on in mid-March, when everyone on realistic person on planet Earth is aware that Justin Fields is getting traded, Bears fans are still you guys are idiots. You'll see what happens, So you were the first one to alert me that this is a situation that Bears fans were heavily invested in. So as a Bears fan, were you surprised by the draft compensation that they got back for Justin Fields?
I guess I was surprised that it was so modest, but I'm less surprised. Again, if we take the Bears at their word that they were really only negotiating with one team, in part because Fields had identified that team and they'd sort of, together identified the destination where they wanted to send him. If you're just negotiating with one team, you're not going to maximize your return. And I think they probably accepted that. It's it's a little bit weird. But it is certainly a favor to Fields if this is in fact where he wanted to go. And it seems like it should have been, right? It's a good landing spot for him. So that's a little bit surprising. It is a relief just to get past some of the local conversations that were happening here, right? Because there were every day that went by that Justin Fields wasn't traded, the Fields, loyalists would dig in a little bit harder, right? And kind of, every day was like an "I told you so" moment. Yep, they didn't trade him again. They love him. They're running it back with him. We're going to trade this pick. I think they probably had to get to this point, given. And we've now spent like years discussing Justin Fields, and I don't think that where he's at in his career is purely a reflection of his own ability or like the way that he might have developed elsewhere. I think the Bears coaches over the years failed him quite a bit. But I also think that the things that were the biggest problem with Justin Fields as a rookie remain the biggest problems with Justin Fields, and they haven't like, I don't know, he's still last in the league in time to throw last year. He still took a ton of sacks last year. He still gets loose with the football, like when he's tackled at the end of runs a lot. Like he puts the ball on the ground a lot. Like there are issues that haven't really been cleaned up since his rookie season. So that's on him. That's on the team. That's on everybody. So I get that it wasn't a first round pick, a second round pick, or anything like that. But I certainly do think that if he was legitimately just like, if everybody was allowed to actually bid and they had a normal bidding war, it's probably a fourth rounder. It's probably better compensation. But as somebody again who finds it really easy to root for Justin Fields, I'm pretty happy with this outcome for him.
Yeah, I think, and really, if you're the Bears front office, you're going to go to war and like hang on to the guy and send him to a spot he doesn't want to go to, when clearly a lot of people in the city and a lot of people in the locker room, probably people in the organization, really love Justin Fields. You're going to really, what's the point? A fourth round pick versus a sixth round pick? Like really at the end of the day, like what is the point when you are so clearly moving on from the player? I'll say a couple things here. Just one, I do think that, when the outrage hits, like Fields goes for a 6th round pick, but like Sam Howell's getting traded for this, and like Sam Darnold signing for $10 million a year. Like Justin Fields is better than those guys. Are we sure? Like, are we sure he's better than those guys? Because like statistically, he's not necessarily. There's the rushing element, but how many conversations do we have to have about how teams don't want to adjust their full offense to these guys? I think that Arthur Smith and the Steelers can do that. So that's why I'm with you. I really like this landing spot. I think Fields got a little overrated and overvalued based on his statistical fantasy output. And I think he got a little overrated and overvalued because everybody really likes him and capital P potential. And I think he does still have that potential, but I mean, shoot, people are still in year whatever it is of Sam Darnold's career talking about potential, right? So like whether it's his fault that he is at this point in his career or it's the Bears' fault, and I'm with you, I think it's a little bit of both. Like he is where he is at this point in his career, and he's in that kind of pure reclamation project part of his career. All that being said, Andy, I think there's a very good chance the Bears get a 4th round pick out of this deal, because all he has to do is play 51% of the snaps. And so, okay, he has to take the job by what, week 6, 7, something like that. That is well within the range of possibility here with Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. And I know I'm going to get painted as like the biggest Russell Wilson hater on planet Earth, and I'm okay with that. I don't have anything personally against Russell Wilson. I just think like I've watched the film the last 2 years, and that's a guy that can get benched for at any point in a season, and Justin Fields can go out there because he certainly has more potential than Russell Wilson at this point in his career. It's like this something I'm working around in my head with quarterback play right now, honestly. Like, and a lot of it comes back to like Russell Wilson, and people throw the stats in your face about like touchdown interception ratio and all this stuff, and like same thing honestly with Sam Howell at parts of the season. Like, look at the passing stats, like he's playing really well. Yeah, but the team and offense is still not, like, it's still not good. Like the offense is not good, and like efficiency wise, he's not good. Part of the thing I think with quarterback play here, honestly, I think Sam Howell is better than Russell Wilson at this point too, but maybe that's a separate discussion. Like I think for quarterback play, the throws that you don't make are almost more important than the throws you make in a weird way. Cause like the results end up being good, but like there's so much meat left on the bone. And that is how I felt about watching Russell Wilson back on film last year. So, I mean, keep your head up, Bears fans. You very well may end up with a 4th round pick out of this deal.
Yeah, I think you can't really overstate, and not to make this like a stats versus film sort of discussion, because you didn't really need to be a film nerd to notice that I just don't think Denver's coaches trusted Russell Wilson like that.
No.
There was really nothing about like the weekly game plans or the throws that he was actually making that tells you that they really trusted him to sort of make every throw in a full normal NFL playbook. It wasn't like that at all. I think they really maximized whatever talents he currently has, right? Like I think they got a lot out of him last year. I think the numbers are fine. But again, that was just not like a normal NFL route tree, route combinations. That was just a ton of short stuff that just did not seem, I don't know, like go look at the next gen passing charts. They're wild. That just wasn't a normal passing offense. And I don't know what we're going to get this year in Pittsburgh. I think they're very fortunate that they have like a stable coaching staff full of adults who can probably handle this really well, because like as soon as that team is, I don't know, if they go 1-2, they go 2-3, people are just going to be clamoring to see Justin Fields, right? Because it's not going to be, there's no chance that offense is like super explosive and high scoring in the first month of the season. That's just probably not where Russell Wilson is at this stage of his career. So if it starts a little shaky, I mean, there's going to be like clamoring in the streets for Fields.
Kenny Pickett traded to the Eagles. We don't have to say much about Kenny Pickett, but however he handled this divorce and all that type of stuff, like we can leave that debate for other people. I'll just say this, man. I hadn't thought obviously about Kenny Pickett much because I'm not watching the Steelers, and obviously they get eliminated in the playoffs. Dude, Kenny Pickett hadn't even been playing for the end of the regular season and into the playoffs. Obviously not popping. All right, Super Bowl's over. Let me first pop in that Steelers that Steelers film. But went back and like charted Diontae Johnson for reception perception. Jeez, God almighty. I forgot how bad it was with Kenny Pickett there. So a divorce is likely best for all involved, but you can see why the Steelers were so ready to just wash their hands of the Kenny Pickett experience, because it was whatever tragedy I thought I was getting on film, I was not ready for just how bad it was.
Yeah, just a weird absence of stats overall for Kenny Pickett, right? Like he didn't throw picks, to his credit, but also never ever threw touchdown passes, right? Like just the exact opposite of an explosive offense with Pickett at the controls. He's kind of a weird backup for Jalen Hurts as well. Like they're not stylistically similar in any way. I mean, for a lot of reasons, it would have made sense for Justin Fields to land there. Not in terms of Justin Fields actually starting games, but just from a pragmatic standpoint. Like if we're forced to replace our starting quarterback, we have somebody who's a little bit more similar in terms of style of play, and Fields that would have made a lot of sense. Pickett having to take the field if anything happens to Hurts seems like just an absolute disaster. But obviously the environment there and the supporting cast is stellar. So perhaps it would go better than I think.
Yeah, what I said about quarterback play, where I'm sort of juggling in my head of like, what do I value more, making the throws, or what am I willing to ding a quarterback for, like not making the throws or passing up the throws, like turning down the open throws, like which I think Russ did a lot of in Denver, in that offense. What's more important? Well, Kenny Pickett didn't make the throws, and then there were a lot of throws he didn't take that he should have taken. So it's just like that's where he's at this point. So he's like even more of a full developmental player at this point than a guy like Justin Fields. All right, let's stick with the Bears, but move on to our next topic here, which more wide receiver shakeup, man. Starting with late Thursday night. The Bears acquired wide receiver Keenan Allen from the Chargers in exchange for a 2024 4th round pick. Listen, there are a lot of angles we could take with the Keenan Allen thing, Andy. But first and foremost, just how do you feel about this guy playing for your favorite team, buddy?
I'm actually like I'm really excited about this because I'm a big Keenan Allen guy. Like
you are.
The obvious issue here is, he's going to be 32 this season, and Keenan has played particularly like into his 30s. It is just playing extraordinarily well, right? Like it's not, maybe this is a case of a guy who always kind of had a little old man game, and now that he's an old man, doesn't matter, right? Like just he's such a pro at getting himself open, at separating, at creating easy opportunities for his quarterback. So I love all that. That said, he's like, there's nothing about adding Keenan Allen that means, the Bears shouldn't still target the wide receiver position, because they're going to have a young quarterback, and you kind of want to get all these guys on the same, I mean, Keenan Allen is like 10 years deeper into his career than a lot of other elements of this offense. So that's a little bit of a concern. It's a turnkey offense though right now, right? Like you get, presumably it's going to be Caleb Williams in there, and it's just, Moore, Allen, a developing offensive line that got a little bit better last year, DeAndre Swift, running backs behind him, all these tight ends. Like we're ready to go. Like you drop a competent quarterback in here, and you should be looking at like 4,400 passing yards, 4,500 passing yards. Like that should be in play. Not to put that on Caleb Williams necessarily. And I tweeted the other day, the Bears have never had, not only have they never had a 4,000 yard passer, they've never had anybody get close. Like Caleb would literally need to just average 226 passing yards per game to set the Bears all-time single season passing record, which is just a scandalously low total, right? We should be able to pull that off with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore on the field. But again, they're not gonna be in on one of the big three receivers. I don't think anybody's gonna fall to where they pick at 9. But like they should still be looking for like early in the draft receiving talent to pair with Caleb Williams over the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do love this duo though of Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. I love the way they work off of each other. They're two guys that can separate. They're two guys that can beat man coverage. When was the last time the Bears had two receivers that can beat man coverage? I mean, because even when like Allen Robinson was having good years with Chicago, it was like, who else is? I mean, it should have been Anthony Miller. I've maintained to this day it should have been Anthony Miller, but but it was not. So I don't know. I think
this is like you're going back to like either Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey for a minute, or like Curtis Conway. Like it's been a minute.
Alshon Jeffrey's not that type of receiver, like he's still a big body, like contested guy down the field. DJ Moore's a separator. Keenan Allen, like I do maintain that Keenan Allen has lost a step. He's declined as a player, which you would expect. He's going to be 32 this season, but what he does well, he is so good at, right? Working the short and intermediate area of the field. Like I've said quarterback friendly. A lot of people have said quarterback friendly when it comes to Keenan Allen's play. And it's just so perfectly descriptive of who he is as a player. Like, again, I know the like target share and yards per route run stuff doesn't totally reflect this like point of a declining player. It's just, I'm just saying there are things that he used to be able to do that he cannot do as well at this point, but still an incredibly effective, reliable player. And I actually kind of love him as a wide receiver too, because like there's no way he's putting up the stats that he used to put up in LA with the Chicago Bears. Because I think if you have the two players like where they are right now at this point in their careers, you're going to run the offense through DJ Moore because he gives you more verticality, more separation down the field, more explosive playability at this point. But that doesn't mean that Keenan Allen can't catch like 80 balls and be an incredibly reliable player for Caleb Williams. I mentioned the Bears, when the last time they've had two receivers that could beat man coverage like this. When has any rookie like first overall pick ever been dropped into a situation where they have two receivers like this? Not to mention they've invested on the offensive line. They've invested in the backfield. They've invested at tight end and Cole Kmet. Like, yeah, this is an offense that's ready to go for Caleb Williams. So, it's good teams in that division, man. Packers obviously are on the rise. The Lions are the Lions. We'll see what the Vikings end up doing, but the Bears definitely have talent to make noise. Not to get your expectations up here in March about a team that so often breaks your heart, buddy, but I do kind of feel like after this trade, I feel better just about generally the direction of the team and many things that have happened and transpired with the Bears over the last few months.
Yeah, it's such a good point about this being just an unusually, like, I don't know. It's the Bears, so you want to say, oh, they'll find a way to screw this up. They find a way to screw a lot of things up, but man, it is really rare for a number one overall pick quarterback to enter a situation that just looks this, ready to go. I mean, these are really good pros, and obviously, injuries can become a problem. All sorts of things can blow up in the NFL. But man, couple of good tight ends, again, a really really gifted receiving back, and then two absolute like high level pros at receiver is just. I don't know, but it's very rare for a top overall pick to step into a situation like this.
And shout out to Keenan Allen. We'll talk more about the Chargers section of this when we get into the panic meter, because a certain quarterback is absolutely going to be featured in the panic meter later on. We'll talk more about the Chargers part of this later on. But I mean, shout out to Keenan Allen for having a team come to him and say, hey, we want you to take a pay cut. Just, nope, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. No, thank you. So he goes and gets that money from the Chicago Bears. Marquise Brown going to get a little bit of money from the Kansas City Chiefs. Not as beefy as some other wide receiver contracts, but Chiefs agree to terms with wide receiver Marquise Brown, obviously formerly of the Cardinals and the Ravens, on a 1-year contract. It's a $7 million deal that's worth up to, my favorite word of the offseason, up to $11 million. Andy, Marquise Brown fills a need for Kansas City. We know they needed a wide receiver. How do you see this group shaking out with breakout rookie Rashee Rice, Marquise Brown with what he does, and obviously Travis Kelce still at this stage of his career?
I love it for everyone. Just an almost perfectly complementary piece. Like whatever you think of Marquise Brown and his shortcomings and his strengths, there isn't anything that you were asking like MVS or Justin Watson or any of those guys to do that Hollywood Brown can't do a little bit better, right? So like just a perfectly complementary piece to the receiving core. I think it's pretty good news for Rashee Rice. Now, like they can still they can and should still add receiving talent in the draft. So yes. We'll see what that looks like. Like we could feel differently about this, several weeks down the road. But for now, this looks like a bit of a win for Kelce and Rice. This isn't like Rice did. The things he did last year, he did them so well, and Mahomes trusted him so much. But it wasn't, it's not like he was just running every route from every spot on the field. They developed him slowly, and he became obviously a trusted member of the offense and hugely productive by the end of the season. But we're not asking him to do the things that MVS was trying to do. And just as somebody who can get deep and create explosive plays with one of the most gifted quarterbacks we've ever seen. Like obviously it's a great spot for Brown, but it just complements the rest of this receiving core so well. So if they don't do another thing, and again they will, but if they don't do another thing, this is already a lot better than last year's receiving core.
Right. I still think they definitely need another outside receiver because I think Rashee Rice is really good in that power slot role. He did a lot of things kind of similar to what Amon-Ra St. Brown was doing very early in his Detroit Lions career. And then obviously the question is just, can you continue to develop in the areas that we've seen Amon-Ra St. Brown develop in throughout the course of his career and sort of become really high up in those wide receiver rankings? Like that's just going to be the question with Rashee Rice. But I think no matter what, you probably don't want to take him out of the things that he was really good at as a rookie. Marquise Brown, I think, is a guy that's probably in an ideal world, like a 60-40 flanker slot player, like a guy that can move inside as well. So, and that doesn't mean, like, I don't think either of these guys is a pure slot player, Rashee Rice or Marquise Brown, but you want them both getting some of those inside reps. So I still think they need to take a big bodied, like X receiver type in the draft, but that player now can be your fourth most targeted player on the offense, as opposed to like, before Marquise Brown, you want that guy to be a legit day one starter. It's similar to how I feel about Curtis Samuel signing with the Bills. Like they now don't, like, if you really gave me truth serum, like who do I think is better at football? Let's not have that discussion. But it gives you that sort of like, all right, wide receiver is still a need, but it's like if we don't come away with a guy in round one that is ready to contribute right away, it's not a debilitating issue where it would have been prior to some of these veteran receiver signings. And I do think Marquise Brown working off of Rashee Rice from a route combination standpoint, I think that's going to be good for both players involved. I think it's obviously going to be good for Patrick Mahomes. Both those guys are really good on these in-breaking routes. So you can use them to free each other up. And that really puts you in potential to get some yards after catch opportunities, because both these guys can be yak players, but in different ways, right? Like Rashee Rice is a big bodied guy that's going to break tackles, whereas Marquise Brown's a smaller player that's not going to break tackles, but can get it done with speed. So I think I'm still probably in on Rashee Rice in fantasy this year. I'm probably still drafting him. Maybe not where I would have prior to Marquise Brown's signing, but I think he's probably still the guy I'm going to rank maybe significantly higher than Marquise Brown. I think he's just kind of in a better part of his career, but love the signing for what it does for all the players involved and the offense.
Yeah, if there was a moment, say a month ago, that you might have thought about taking Rashee Rice in and I'd seen some people suggest as much, that you might take him in like round 2. I don't think that's on the table. I don't think he's like a round 2 receiver. But I also think this was, knowing that they were always going to add somebody, or at least attempt to add somebody, and if they couldn't, they were going to add in the draft. So far, this is a pretty good outcome for Rashee Rice. Like, I don't think he's losing a ton of value from wherever you thought he should go, a month ago. To your point about this draft class and what they still perhaps need to add. Unlike last year's draft class, there's a bunch of big X receiver types with like speed and 6'3", 6'4", and maybe they're developmental prospects, but they certainly look the part. So that can definitely be found in the 2024 draft class.
Yeah, it's perfect. You're always going to pay a little bit of the Chiefs tax with these players in fantasy, right? Like, yeah. Even down to like the depth chart type guys. Like last year, Sky Moore goes in the 10th round. Probably should have been like a 15th round pick, if we're being honest. Kadarius Toney always steamed up. Like, you're always going to have to pay a little bit of the Chiefs tax, but I probably was not willing to pay it prior with Rashee Rice. Now I think this move actually could make me more interested in drafting him. All right, couple other things to clean up here real quick before we get into the panic meter. One, the Vikings swing a massive early draft day trade. They send the 42nd and 188th overall pick in this year's draft and a second rounder next year to the Texans in exchange for the 23rd overall pick and a 232nd overall pick this year. They're obviously gonna, they're shooting to get a quarterback at this point, right? So, I don't really, we don't have to break this down. I mean, it makes sense. This is what you do, but the Vikings are definitely on my radar as like potentially about to give up a Trey Lance type of package. If they want to get up into the top 3, which Daniel Jeremiah believes the Vikings are going to, quote, put a strong effort forward to get North Carolina's quarterback Drake May. We'll see. I think Washington should take Drake May second overall and not think twice about it. Yeah. So maybe they get in the top 3. At the very worst, though, they'll get themselves up into a range, I think, to take a quarterback like JJ McCarthy.
It has to only be 3 that's available, right? Like I'm pretty sure at this point, yes. 1 isn't available. I can't imagine that 2 is available. So we're really talking about the 3rd pick in the draft, and then it's not like it's not like the Vikings get to choose their guy. If it's May that they want, they better hope that he actually falls to 3. But this is so, I mentioned earlier that I've started to go through the process of getting my pre-draft, 2024 fantasy ranks in order. Jefferson is really hard. Shouldn't be hard, right? Like Justin Jefferson, if we're just redrafting the NFL from scratch, is very near the top. But man, like, am I going to take Justin Jefferson in the first half of the first round if Sam Darnold is his quarterback? And like, I don't feel like there's a rookie who's ready to go and ready to perhaps be a star. Right now, I feel terrible about this quarterback situation, and it pushes Jefferson to sort of the back end of the first round for me. And they still got to extend him. Like Justin Jefferson has to make a decision on the Vikings and where the Vikings are headed. And so I certainly understand their desire to get into the top 3 somewhere. I don't know that, like it's fine to just sort of generally like JJ McCarthy, but I don't know. I don't think he's ready to step in and be a star in the NFL anytime soon. So that wouldn't really move the needle for me in the same way that a trade up for May would do it.
Yeah, he makes for a very risky pick very early in the draft right now. And like there's a certain level of baseline where like Justin Jefferson's not going to fall below a certain point because he's just too good at the game. But I don't know where that baseline is, and it's probably lower than some of the other top tier receivers that are going to go off the board very, very early in more secure quarterback pairing situations. And then the other guys in the offense, it makes you super nervous about this year. But overall, I do trust Kevin O'Connell and like what the Vikings have built to eventually draft a quarterback and eventually develop that player. It's just, how long is that going to take for, the selfish fantasy football purposes? How long is that going to take? What do you have to live through there? Another thing to mention here, the Jets signed Aaron Rodgers' blindside protector. They acquired former Cowboys left tackle Tyron Smith on a 1-year deal. Contract's worth up to $20 million. A lot of playtime incentives there for Tyron Smith. You look on paper, Andy, and the Jets offensive line looks a lot better than it did on paper, dude, this time last year, and definitely even just into training camp last season, when we all knew that was going to be a problem. And then obviously 4 plays into the season, more problems than the Jets ever thought they were going to be living through came to pass.
This, we're always talking about something absolutely delightful with Aaron Rodgers in the offseason, right? And like, if he's not, flirting with the possibility of being a game show host, if he's not going on, wild ass retreats somewhere, now we have to consider the possibility that Aaron Rodgers ends up on a weird presidential ticket, like just a wild team that creates and a wild player who creates distractions where none need to exist. But on paper, again, assuming Aaron Rodgers is focused in on actually being the quarterback of the Jets this year, it's a pretty fun team. It's a damn fun team.
It's a really fun team, and they're another team. I mean, just drink every time we say it. They could use a wide receiver. They could certainly take one early in the draft. Like I said, they're visiting with Mike Williams this week. I think actually today, as we're taping this, Mike Williams is allegedly at the Jets facility. So they could use another receiver. That would really kind of be a finishing touch here. But yeah, the fact that they acquired Tyron Smith, he definitely is going to miss time. Like he's not a just set your watch by it type of player at this point in his career. There's no question about that. But it's an upgrade just as an option. Morgan Moses, they get it right tackle. It's a better option than what they had last year. On paper, this is a much better, it's a better offensive line, certainly, than what they were dealing with last year. Final piece of news here before we talk through the panic meter. We bid farewell to another NFL legend. And like, that is not an exaggeration when I say that about this player. Aaron Donald retired from the NFL after 10 seasons, Andy. It was on Friday. I mean, just very few players do you see just from snap one to their final snap in the NFL be truly a dominant force. Aaron Donald was that. He's one of the best defensive players, I think, in NFL history. Certainly in like my time covering the league, which has been, from a very semi-professional to, moderately professional like I am now, 2013 to now. That's like the Aaron Donald window. He's definitely the premier defensive player of, like I said, my time covering the league.
Yeah, as disruptive as any player in league history, right? We could have if you're going to have a conversation about where he ranks historically, the other names that you're throwing into the conversation are like Lawrence Taylor, and I don't even know who else belongs in the discussion, right? Like supremely disruptive players, and managed to be so up until the absolute. I mean, shoot, we got the Geno Smith, oh my God moment in Aaron Donald's final season, just absolutely dominant, start to finish, like a flawless career, right? Hugely impactful in the biggest moments of the Super Bowl win. Just as near perfect as a career as one can put together, and it's easy to imagine. Respect anybody for stepping away whenever they do. But in some ways, it feels like the Barry Sanders thing, right? Like he could have. Yeah. I mean, there could have been 3 or 4 more dominant years ahead the way he was playing.
Yeah, he was still an all-pro last year. It seemed like basically since they won the Super Bowl, or that week going into the Super Bowl, there had always been sort of whispers about Aaron Donald's retirement and that he might want to go out on his own terms at the top of his game, not like a declining player bouncing around type thing. And we definitely never saw anything but like the best of Aaron Donald. The only time outside of his rookie year he wasn't an all-pro was in 2022 when he was injured and the whole Rams team was a nightmare. Like, that's how good he was. So, one of the best to ever do it. And from a sentimental side, I love when guys only play for one team, like him and Jason Kelce retiring in the same offseason. I do love to see that, even though, like I said, I respect Keenan Allen for saying, yeah, I'm a longtime Charger. I'm a Charger for life, right up until you don't want to pay me my money. I totally get that, but it's cool to see a guy like Aaron Donald just be with one. I mean, not always the LA Rams, because he was around with the damn St. Louis Rams. So it's cool to see him end his career on his own terms. From just a pure football perspective, that Rams defense is not going to be good next year. I mean, they're losing Raheem Morris, they're losing Aaron Donald. They doubled down and made a strength stronger in their offense with some of the offensive line investments of this past season. So, like, that offense is going to be putting up some numbers next year. That is for damn sure.
Yeah. Generally speaking, in fantasy, everybody loves when the defense gets bad and the and the offense has to keep the pedal to the floor as often as possible. So whatever keeps them passing, start to finish in games, that's good in our game.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to run through the People's Panic Meter, post-free agency panic, right after this. All right, we're back. Let's jump into it. The People's Panic Meter. You sent in via the mailbag, fantasy mailbag, yahoosports.com, or social media. Tons of responses. We're going to get to as many as we can here for what we have time for, starting with Matthew Hernandez, our only person to send in an audio message. So you get bumped. You send an audio message, you get bumped to the top of the line. Didn't expect to get a response with this player. You're never going to guess who he's panicking about. But let's play Matthew's audio in the People's Panic Meter. Here it is.
Good morning, gentlemen. The player I am panicking the most about right now is Will Levis. I mean, it sounds good all on paper. They got the top 10 pick. They signed the center Cushenberry. They signed Pollard. They signed Ridley. All is well. They're spending their money, but I don't think they're spending it wisely. Now for the running back, Pollard. I mean, I think it's kind of a redundant signing the Spears. I expected a breakout year from Spears. Ridley, $20 million. He's got to come in and be your number one. This is not Falcons Calvin Ridley. D-Hop, another year older, 32, I think, at this point. He can fall off a cliff at any moment. And Burks, he's as unreliable as they come. So, and now we move on to Callahan, who's never called plays before. I mean, if this goes poorly, this could be a top 5 pick in 13th months. Will Levis, from a rookie year, that's very promising. He can be a backup. They draft in top 5 and take a QB.
All right, Andy, of all the players I thought we'd get some panic responses about, didn't think it would be Will Levis. But I don't know, man. I don't really have like a strong take about Will Levis, other than I kind of think he could maybe be this generation's Jameis Winston from like a pure fantasy perspective. Like, I think that he could end up being that player. I do think, though, they're pretty well set up to succeed, even if I hear some of the complaints from Matthew there about like the running backs overlap in skill set. And obviously I think they still have some work to do on the offensive line. But if Will Levis is the guy for Tennessee, I think he's pretty well set up to succeed with the guys they've got there, regardless of whether you think Calvin Ridley is overpaid and all that stuff.
It's funny to hear you say that you don't have much of a take, and then you give a wild ass take. Like that was great. That was really well done. Yeah, I think it's
is that crazy? Is that wild of a take?
I mean, just hitting anybody with a Jameis comp is man, that's good.
Fair point.
It's really good.
Yeah, Jameis is pretty one of one. That's fair point.
And it's plausible. Like, it's his Levis's best moments were great. But like so many other young quarterbacks, the actual moment to moment of watching him play was not always as exciting as purely the highlights, right? So it's certainly an open question as to whether he's a viable starter in the NFL. That's not settled at all. And he wasn't, I don't know. We're not talking about somebody who was the number 1 overall pick or anything. I mean, there were plenty of questions about him coming into the league. So it's fine that hasn't been firmly established yet. It's hard to do more if you're Tennessee than they have done for him in free agency. Like, I don't know, the offense is shaping up to be like, if he's a competent quarterback, this is going to be a pretty decent season. So if you're a Titans fan, you have to love what's happened. Not that I think Tony Pollard is an unusually special running back, but they preserve a pretty productive running back tandem there. And now you've got like bookend receivers who are both really good. Like they're, not perhaps the best versions that we have seen of either guy, but this is a pretty good receiving core. And so I just think that the support system around Levis is about as good as you could possibly expect. So we're going to find out. And again, like his best moments last year were full of promise.
Yeah, and so much of quarterback play, especially young quarterback development, I should say, comes down to ecosystem. They're clearly doing a lot of work to make that ecosystem good. Again, even if you can quibble with, I think you can do more than quibbling with what they paid Calvin Ridley. But like the market's the market. They have money to burn. There's no question about that. You can kind of raise an eyebrow at that signing. You can raise an eyebrow at the Tony Pollard signing. Like they are so much better on paper right now than that offense has been over the last few seasons. Yep. I mean, they desperately needed receiver talent. They desperately needed like a true separator. Ridley accomplishes both goals. They can certainly get somebody in the top 10. I don't know if this is an offense I'm dying to invest in, but I'm much more interested in it, I think, than I was a few weeks ago. And I think there's some signals with Will Levis, but yeah, I mean, the scenario that Matthew paints out where they're not a good. I do kind of wonder if like they can be good enough to not be a top 5 pick team next year. Like if they're picking in the top 5, then Will Levis was a disaster, and like they're going to just take another quarterback there in the top 5 and start all over again. So that's probably how I feel about that one. All right, our next one, Dino says, "Hey Matt, I know you've discussed recently, but what on earth are the Denver Broncos trying to do? Have they just resigned to licking their wounds from Russ's dead cap hit for 2024? Why did Sean Payton choose Denver last year if the writing was already on the wall? I don't see a direction here, and the lack of shopping/selling in free agency aside from Jerry Jeudy really makes me wonder how long this organization will stay blindfolded. Thanks." Andy, I feel like I'm going to ask you this question. I think I could probably ask every person that comes on this podcast over the next month or two, really leading up to the draft. The question that Dino asks here, which is like, explain the Denver Broncos to me. Like, what are the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, in some ways, I don't think that they're actually worthy of panic. I don't.
Fair.
I mean, how can you talk yourself into high expectations? For the 2024 Broncos. And again, recognizing that we have a full draft ahead of us, but so many holes on offense, right? I don't see the scenario where this can be a sort of league average to good offensive system. Like I just don't see it in the year ahead. They must be eyeing one of the quarterbacks who is not one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the draft. They must be comfortable. They better get comfortable with that. I think Mims is an interesting young receiver. We're going to get Diontae, I don't know, another year removed from the injury. He was fine last year, not necessarily super explosive, but he was fine. But there's not a lot to get excited about here. And when there's not a lot to get excited about, there's also not much reason to panic. I don't know. This doesn't seem like a wide range of outcomes sort of team. This seems like a team that is a couple years away at best, and is in all likelihood not going to be particularly good next year. I don't really see the path, and I don't see them as a particularly panic worthy team.
Yeah, I'm with you that if you're like a Marvin Mims dynasty bro, you already should have been panicked based on what we saw last year. Like Cortland Sutton, like who's throwing him the football? I don't know. It's they just feel like a very identity-free team right now, other than like the identity is Sean Payton. And like I think based on watching the Broncos last year, Sean Payton still has good ideas. Like the route concepts are still good. There's still like a good. There are bones of a good offense there, but you're not eating off bones, man. Like that's just like there's a lot more that needs to come together, and I don't really know where they're going with this team. Let's move on to the next one here. Ethan Conley sends in Diontae Johnson. From a quarterback perspective, this was about the only move in the league that wasn't a clear improvement over Kenny Pickett. That said, It's also not really a downgrade either. At least we can still tell ourselves a story that Bryce Young takes a second-year step. So, does going into a situation where Johnson is the absolutely unquestioned best wide receiver in the room with a quarterback who desperately needs to get rid of the ball quickly for fear of snapping like a toothpick lead to high volume targets like a high floor PPR play? Or is this like getting excited about Brandon Cooks with Davis Mills? Very harsh. I mean, so many harsh things happened in that email, but not unfactual.
Yeah, this is a really good note. And I like a lot of the comments here. I agree. I mean, obviously, there's no question about it. This is not a dream landing spot for Diontae in terms of fantasy production, and yet from just purely a PPR perspective, can we get some kind of empty yards here and huge reception totals week to week? And can he be the absolute focal point of the passing attack? That is very much in play. That can absolutely happen. So, I think on volume alone, we could get a pretty good season here in which nobody else on that team is particularly notable for fantasy purposes. I think that's in play, but I think he's the unquestioned number one. I think there's a path here to 130, 140 targets. Like we could see a huge target total. So it's not bad in that regard. I mean, again, ideally you would love to see Diontae Johnson tied to a virtuoso quarterback at some point in his career moving forward. And maybe Young becomes that guy, because like you can, I know his first season was more or less trash, and was something to forget, but like, that was still a talented collegiate player, who, again, we only have 1 year under our belt. And he was running for his life a lot of the time. So, and had no one to throw to. I mean, he was in the situation that a lot of number one quarterbacks get thrown into, unlike what we think is waiting for Caleb Williams. So Diontae is extremely good. Total pro, underrated by both fantasy players and I think, your typical NFL fans. So, it is a good situation for Diontae in terms of volume, and that probably saves his fantasy value.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to like not get too excited about Diontae Johnson in fantasy, just because like we don't know what Bryce Young will be. But there's obviously proof of concept that that he can have an empty calories type of receiving season here, because Adam Thielen had one in Carolina last year. Now Adam Thielen is still on the roster, so like what's his role? What's Deontay's role? I think Carolina absolutely probably still needs like another receiver, an outside guy, based on how this current staff feels about Jonathan Mingo. I think we should probably know how they feel about Jonathan Mingo. So I still think they're a team that could add somebody at the 33rd pick. There's no question about that. So a lot of questions, I think, still to be answered here, but I think Bryce Young is going to be better than Kenny Pickett. Like, that's a super low bar to clear, based on what I said earlier in the podcast. But I think Bryce Young can be better than that, and like, it's not a coincidence. I mean, it's kind of ironic because I think he got the worst quarterback play of his career, Diontae Johnson, last year, with Kenny Pickett taking most of the snaps last season. I can't tell you how many scars I've got with the Kenny Pickett film that I just watched. But anyways, it's like not a coincidence that last year, when he finally kind of had his route tree mixed up a little bit, when he didn't just have to run like go routes and comeback routes from the X receiver position, Matt Canada gets fired in the middle of the season. People always complain about Diontae Johnson's yards per target. He has a career high over 8 yards per target last year. Like, that wasn't as big of an issue as it was previously, because we got some better things mixed into the offense. I really think Dave Canales is like miles better an offensive designer than what we've gotten out of Matt Canada for years here. So I think you can talk yourself into Diontae Johnson. I'm going to try to remain like kind of middle ground on the whole thing, because I'm a big Diontae Johnson fan, but there's just a lot of unknowns here with the Carolina Panthers. Ethan sent in another player here, and this one is definitely interesting. And I mean, we're talking Panic Meter podcast. We're deep into it. We haven't mentioned the name Justin Herbert yet. Ethan sends in, look, obviously they got rid of their 2 top wide receivers in a room that basically had 0 fantasy relevance beyond Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. The basic question is this: is there any amount of additions to the group of pass catchers the Chargers could make that would make you interested in Justin Herbert anywhere near where he's used to going in drafts? Or are they screaming at us that they want to break the rush attempts record so loudly that we would be foolish not to listen? So, Andy, I believe you said on Twitter, like, Justin Herbert is the obvious answer here in terms of players we should panic about. So give the State of the Union on the Justin Herbert situation.
Yeah, I was actually surprised that it took so long. Not just like, from the moment we started talking about it in this pod, but like even like when you sent out the initial tweet looking for subjects of panic, I was surprised at how long it took for anyone to say Justin Herbert because again, I'll reference it again. I've begun the process of going through fantasy ranks for next year. He's like my QB 18 right now, and I just can't. I mean, he can finish higher than that because other guys are going to get hurt, but I do not see the path, and that is assuming that the Chargers use one of those like the early pick on one of the big three receivers, right? I mean, it sure looks like this draft is going to go 3 QBs and then 3 wide receivers. It probably should, and so the Chargers are going to get one of those guys. So it's not like it's just Palmer and Johnston as the 1 and 2 in that receiving core, but still we have Greg Roman to worry about. We have the long history of Jim Harbaugh as a head coach to worry about. I mean, that like just in terms of pass volume, his teams have always been at the bottom of the league. We know what Roman is about. We have to assume that this team is also going to be looking at like Blake Corum or similar in the draft, right? Like they're going to run a ton. So no, I don't see any path for Justin Herbert to, especially when draft season rolls around, when it's like August and September. I don't know how we get to a point where we're taking Justin Herbert as like a top 8 fantasy quarterback. I can't imagine it right now.
Oh no, I think there's no shot that we're taking Justin Herbert that high. Now, I got a couple of like complicated thoughts about this because number one, Andy, I almost guarantee you that, and I'm not saying you, but I guarantee you there are going to be a lot of sections of the fantasy football community that like overreacts to the like run heaviness that's about to happen in this Chargers offense. Like people think that they're going to come in here and break the rush attempts record. No, they're not. Like Jim Harbaugh wanted to go to LA to coach Justin Herbert. Like Justin Herbert was the draw here. I do think they're going to want to run the ball well because the Chargers, I mean, look, obviously Austin Eckler is my guy. That's my dude. But like, he's even said they haven't always had the best run game. And I don't know that that's all. I'm not saying that that's Austin Eckler's fault, but like they never really got that second pitch right. They never really had like an offensive line. This hasn't been a great running team. Like I do think that building that back up is a key part of the rebuild here. They can be run heavy and still be an efficient passing attack. I think that's probably what they want to be. The problem there is what I said, like an efficient passing attack, not with these receivers. Okay. Like it's fine that they moved on from Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Like, I think that's where the double counting is happening here. Like they said they want to be run heavy and then they cut their 2 best receivers or they moved on from their 2 best receivers. We all should have known that was a very real thing that could have happened given where those guys were at the points in their career and what they were being paid. And by the way, like if you've been watching Chargers football the last 3 seasons and haven't thought, shoot, they need another receiver beyond those 2 guys, I don't know what you were watching. Like there's an element of that offense that was missing even when Keenan and Mike were there doing their thing. So, that's all being said, but yeah, it's a very real risk that like Justin Herbert is got I think it's a lock that he's going to have a subpar receiving room this year on paper going into it. Cause shoot, like they might take a receiver at the 5th overall draft pick. They also might trade down. They might take an offensive lineman. And even if they take a receiver 5th overall, like I think Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison and Rome Odunze are leaps and bounds better prospects than like Quentin Johnston was this time last year. But you don't need to look too far to see that like sometimes it takes time for a guy to be ready to play in the league because you just got to look on the other side of the room there to Quentin Johnston. So the risk is certainly real with this offense and Justin Herbert right now. Yeah,
the other thing is like just let's assume they take Neighbors at number 5. You still need like 2 more receivers. You're not, that doesn't fix the receiving core, right? They're not like 1 guy away. Given what they've lost and what they already didn't have behind Keenan Allen, they need multiple pieces there. So again, it's just a long road back to top 5, top 8 status for Justin Herbert from where they are right now.
Two more emails and then we'll rapid fire the social submissions here. We can honestly rapid fire these because I don't know if there's a ton to panic here. But Jeff sends in, hey guys, what is the Cowboys plan for the running back room? This being such a bad running back class seems like they have nothing to lean on with Tony Pollard gone. Thanks. I mean, definitely I understand if you're a Cowboys fan panicking about what are they going to roll out at running back last year after they weren't a good running team last year. But I mean, if they land a back in the draft, Andy, which is certainly possible. Seems like what they should do. Second, third round pick type player. That player is going to be one of the biggest winners, like headliner of every winner section and winner losers coming out of the NFL draft.
Yeah. I wouldn't panic just yet. I would assume that, whether it's Jonathan Brooks or whoever it is, I would assume that you're getting somebody from this rookie class. And I don't know. We're talking about running backs here, so we also shouldn't assume that it seems like a shallower draft class than many. But there's still going to be some guys in this draft class that we are drafting in fantasy for the next 5 or 6 years. Like, I wouldn't sweat that. I agree. The running back to be named for the Cowboys is almost certainly going to be one of the buzziest rookies going into fantasy drafts in August and September. So I don't think we have to sweat this too hard.
Blake also sends in, I'm scared the Falcons draft Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors at 8th overall in the NFL draft because I recently traded for Drake London. Love the show, guys. I mean, come on, this is not the time to panic about Drake London. This is the time to be dancing in the street about Drake London. Shoot, by the way, they could and maybe should draft one of those receivers because they're going to need him. I don't think that room is good enough with Drake London, Darnell Mooney, and I mean, Rondale Moore is not even a receiver. So like that doesn't count. And look at the other guys behind him. So they could draft one of those guys, but I don't think that would be like the end of Drake London at all. I mean, we'll definitely have to have a conversation closer to fantasy season about where is the actual appropriate range to rank Drake London. But this is not that time right now. This is not a time to be panicking, I think, about Drake London.
Yeah, I feel like this question tells us more about Blake than it does the Falcons, right? Like, this is somebody who, things appear to be going well for one of my players. What are all the terrible things that could possibly befall me? Yeah. First of all, I don't think one of those guys is going to fall to 8. I'd love it if one of them fell to the Bears at 9. I just, realistically, I think they go 4, 5, 6 or pretty close to that range. And number 2, I don't think it would be a killer for Drake London because the quarterback upgrade was so massive. I think it's going to be smooth sailing for Drake London this year.
Couple other social ones just to clean up here. One, Josh Olmstead says, with the quarterbacks all going somewhere and the top 3 picks now solidly looking like quarterbacks with no hopes of trading up, I am very concerned that the New York Giants will have Daniel Jones as their number 1 quarterback this year. What about grabbing Rome Odunze at 6 and then trading back up into the first round to reunite him with Michael Penix? I mean, sure, I guess. I'm really not trying to have Rome Odunze go to the Giants, okay? Because there's already some like analytics bros, on Dynasty Twitter that seem to hate Rome Odunze, and I want those people to take their L for sure because Rome Odunze is a damn good player, and I'm really not trying to have him go to the Giants. So let's get that straight, Josh. But secondly, I mean, there's a very real chance that Daniel Jones is the number 1 quarterback for the Giants this year. Yeah. Drew Lock is the backup. Drew Lock could be starting games for you at some point this year because of the whole injury guarantee situation with Daniel Jones. Like, he could end up being this year's Russell Wilson or this year's Derek Carr because they won't eventually bench him because they're going to move on from him. Like, for whatever I said about the Broncos not understanding their plan, I'm really confused about the Giants right now as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And obviously Locke went there thinking he seemed to be of the mind that he might be able to compete for the starting role there at some point. So I agree that Daniel Jones is not a particularly exciting prospect. I further agree that it's not necessarily where we want to see one of the top 3 receivers land, but it's such a screaming need for that team that it's hard to imagine they don't take a receiver. So I think that's probably something we can pencil in. This is also a team that I thought would be, and believe me, I understand why Justin Fields himself wouldn't necessarily want to go there, but man, at some level, Justin Fields has a lot of the same problems that Daniel Jones does. So maybe it's, maybe that creates a terrible scenario for a head coach, but this is definitely a spot where he could have competed for the starting job immediately.
all-time sacks and fumble records would be in danger if Daniel
Yeah.
Jones and Justin Fields are on the same team. We could probably close out with this one here because there's some connective tissue. Brian F sends in, I'm panicking about Geno Smith and what I should give up to get Sam Howell, or should I even bother? He's a 5th rounder who got traded for a 3rd, meaning they think he could be the future. Help me, please. Okay, Sam Howell did not get traded for a 3rd rounder. Sam Howell was traded for a package that include like a package of picks that also got a 3rd rounder back. So let's be clear about that. My alarm bells did go off when Adam Schefter said Sam Howell was brought in to compete with Geno Smith. GM John Schneider then went on the radio and said, no, we're bringing in Sam Howell, but Geno Smith is our starter. He also then was the one who insinuated that we wanted Drew Lock back, but he thought he could go compete with Daniel Jones there in New York. So that's why he went there. And then Drew Lock has to go out in his introductory press and said, no. Like, I know Daniel Jones is starter. So a lot of like connective quarterback weirdness here with this particular transaction. But bottom line, Andy, do you buy or sell the idea that Geno Smith is in danger of losing his job to Sam Howell?
Unless this is just an incredible developmental offseason for Sam Howell, I don't see how that happens. I think these two are pretty far apart. Not that Geno Smith, last season was exactly what he was the year before, but he had some really nice moments and he had some really nice games. Late in the season, had some really nice games. So I just don't think that's in the cards. And he's not like, it feels like Geno Smith is like 40 years old, but he's actually not, right? Like he has a few years ahead of him, and he's just, in my mind, he's clearly a tier or two above Sam Howell right now. So I don't think this is, I don't know, of all the things to worry about if you're a Seattle fan, this for me would not be one of them.
Yeah, there's a chance Geno could play his way out of the job. I tend to doubt it because I think he's pretty good. But like, if he goes out there and has, 5 bad games in a row, maybe we see Sam Howell. And I like the idea of acquiring Sam Howell for all the I didn't buy into Sam Howell's empty calorie stats last year. He's still a young quarterback who I think has, maybe not potential to develop, but hits that baseline of like good backup quarterback that if you got to throw him out there for 3 games, like good things can happen. And like, if Geno Smith was to ever get hurt, I like having him as the backup. If you're drafting like DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett or Jackson Smith and Jigba, like he's not going to have Eric Bieniemy's weird, like, let's get Byron Pringle targets offense, here in Seattle. Like, I think there's actually a chance he could pump production to those 3 guys. So I like the Sam Howell move overall. I don't buy that it's a move to compete with Geno Smith.
Yeah.
Like they needed a backup quarterback. I think Sam Howell is a pretty good backup quarterback. All right, Andy, it's going to do it. I think we helped some people with some panic. We had a lot of news and things to talk through. Like, it has been a busy time in the NFL world here. So much going on, man. It's been a wild couple of weeks. I think I'm finally still like coming down from, all right, massive news is not going to break if I dare to drive 10 minutes down the road somewhere.
Man, that Monday and Tuesday of the opening of free agency, those were a couple of like really special NFL days. And we kind of knew it was going to go that way because literally every running back in the league was available to be signed. But that was a blast. Those were a couple of really fun days. And shout out to you for incredible coverage, like in the moment. That was a lot of content that you managed to squeeze through the funnel in a short period of time.
It was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed, like, again, just that constant anxiety of like, Justin Fields news breaks at like 8 p.m. on a damn Saturday. Luckily your boy has no life and was already working. So I was like, yeah, no problem. I can bang out the blurb right now on Justin Fields. We can get that thing out in the moment. So it was great. It was a fun week, but we are officially closing the doors here on free agency, and we are moving on to draft season. Hopefully we can get Andy and the boys back on the show here as soon as possible. Come in for a draft show here at some point, bro. You got all your fantasy baseball stuff, but we are officially moving on to draft season. We kick it off on Thursday with Charles McDonald, who's joining the show to break down this year's quarterback prospects. Also, be sure to tune in for a special podcast announcement for draft season. I will unveil all of our very special draft season plans here on the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show on Thursday. Until then, we're out.